There are many 5G conspiracy theories. One crackpot conspiracy is that the vaccine is a microchip of sorts or some kind of ferritin that will be activated upon completion of 5G cell towers. It's absurd. I'm sorry. It's just not reality. Okay, there's always a weird possibility and astronomical odds that these things could be true, but it's just not. You know, I'll tell you this. Every time a new generation of cell networks comes out, we get crazy conspiracy theories about what they're going to do and what fifth generational technology is and 5 gigahertz, whatever. Okay. But the one conspiracy no one considered was that in order to enact the Green New Deal, which called for banning air travel, 5G would be rolled out, causing problems with airline altimeters, making it so these planes must be shut down. And here we are. A bunch of airlines are delaying or outright canceling flights because of the rollout of 5G cell technology. I do not believe there's any actual Green New Deal conspiracy. It's a joke, but sure, they'll run with it anyway because humor is lost on these establishment journalist types. But basically what's happening is a bunch of cell companies, they want to roll out 5G technology, which will increase our data rates on our phones. Cool. But airplanes, the big jets, use a similar bandwidth of radio frequency, and there may be interference with the new 5G towers. So they're going to be delaying indefinitely the rollout of some of these towers. A bunch of airlines are recoiling. And I do think if there actually is any kind of conspiracy, it's probably just lies. I think there's a good possibility that airlines are just suffering from COVID. Travel has become a lot harder. A lot of people don't want to travel. A lot of people don't want to fly wearing masks. There are labor shortages. And so it is particularly convenient for these airlines to be like, geez, we have to shut down. Because there's no real conspiracy when you think about why it's happening. One of the causes of the big delays and shutdowns we saw over the holidays was not just that many of the employees of these companies were getting COVID, but it was because they were bumping into federal regulation limits on how much a person in the airline industry can work. I talked with a pilot. He told me that there's a limit. You're only allowed to fly so many hours. I mean, they don't want you to be fatigued and tired and crash a plane, right? So what happens is as people get sick or call out or quit their jobs, the remaining pilots are reaching their federal limit of how much they can actually fly, and then these airlines are forced to delay or cancel flights. Now they have another excuse, 5G towers. But come on. How did they not know this was going to be happening? How did they not coordinate with the FAA or Pete Buttigieg, who's supposed to be in charge of this stuff, I guess? Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe it's not him. Well, I don't know. Maybe it is really simple in that we have a major crisis because airline industry screwed this one up and nobody coordinated properly on what this was going to be when it rolled out. Or maybe there's a little bit of this. If the airlines were already stressed and strained, and we know that's true, and now they're just like, look, we've already got enough people stretched to their limit. Let's just call this one and cancel some flights. What I mean to say is they wanted to cancel flights given the opportunity, but probably wouldn't have. Because of the 5G rollout, they said, we can stand to reduce some hours. Let's roll with it. Well, let's read the story and see what's going on with the new 5G conspiracy. The Daily Mail reports AT&T and Verizon have launched their 5G networks across the U.S., but it has sparked travel chaos due to dozens of flights being canceled and then resumed when the rollout was suddenly halted near airports over flying safety fears. The rollout has gone ahead with 4,500 towers, but 500 that are near 88 unspecified airports are not being turned on due to fears the frequency they emit could interfere with aircraft radar technology. The pause on those towers was only decided yesterday afternoon, by which point some international airlines had canceled flights using Boeing 777 aircraft, which were of highest concern. We have the list. For those that are seeking to travel, let me break it down for you. Which flights have been canceled or changed already? Delta said in a statement that it expects some flights to be canceled, but the airline will not say which or why. Emirates has Emirates flights, all of them, to and from these airports: Boston, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Miami, Newark, New Jersey, Orlando, Florida, San Francisco, and Seattle. The airline's flights to LAX, New York, and Dulles are still operating. All Nippon, 20 passenger and cargo flights scheduled on Boeing 777s from Haneda to Narita airports in Japan to the U.S. through Thursday. Japan Airlines, Air India, British Airways, Cathay Pacific, Korean Airlines, Austrian Airlines, Germany's Lufthansa, are all being shut down to some degree. They go on to say, as a result of the halt, the airlines, which are based in different time zones, heard the news at varying times throughout the night, are scrambling to resume flights. The result is a thickening headache at airports where the chaos is playing out in cancellations, staff shortages, and a lack of the right planes in the right place at the right time. United has canceled 20 flights in and out of Newark already. Safety is always our priority. We are monitoring the situation in the U.S. closely and will continue to review our schedule in the next few hours. We're disappointed that some of our customers are facing potential disruption, and we'll update them as soon as possible on any changes to their travel plans, spokesman told dailymail.com. Now, look, a lot of people are calling out the Biden administration, saying, Pete Buttigieg, he's what, the transportation guy? He's supposed to be on top of this. He's supposed to be looking at potential impacts in travel and, shipping and deal with it. He didn't. We have shipping shortages. I mean, look, let's be real. Pete Buttigieg was given a job because he bowed out during the primary and endorsed Joe Biden. That's it. He's unqualified for the position, and thus we all suffer. Now, whether or not this was specifically his purview, I don't know for sure. I think to a certain degree we can say that, yeah, the Biden administration should be tracking major industries like this and basically preparing for something like this, and they didn't do it. Let's just be real, man. The Biden administration is an unmitigated disaster. It's a disaster, and it's getting worse. His approval rating is in the gutter. People don't identify as Democrats anymore, and it's fairly obvious. So for those that are curious, here's what they're saying. This graphic shows how the wireless spectrum used by 5G networks could interfere with altimeters, which measure a plane's altitude and is especially important for low visibility operations. The CEOs of the airlines have asked officials for that the 5G be implemented everywhere in the country except within the approximate 2 miles of the airport runways and some key airports. And that means, to a degree, outside the airports, you will not have particularly good cell coverage. Well, I mean, 4G is not that bad. But here we can see this drawing of a little airplane, and the radar altimeter signal uses 4.2 to 44 gigahertz range. 5G signals are in a similar wavelength range as those used by altimeters. Let me just point out, all right? Let me just tell you. This should have been taken care of a long time ago. This should have been under the Trump administration. This should have been taken care of a long time ago. The Biden administration should have taken care of this. I don't know what to tell you, man. The federal government is supposed to be monitoring this kind of stuff because what you need to know about wavelength is that it's publicly owned and it's licensed, that it's auctioned off, and you get it for a certain amount of time. So companies like AT&T and Verizon are like, hey, we want to use these signals. Then the government has to look at who's using these radar frequencies, and then they license them out. Because you could, if you start using these frequencies, cause serious problems. So one of the reasons why airplanes, they tell you to turn your phone off or put it in airplane mode, because your phones can interfere with the plane's instruments. It was crazy. One time I was on a plane, and we were sitting on the tarmac. We're about to take off, and they go, whoever has their cell phone turned on, please turn it off. And then we waited a few minutes, and then they come back on. They were like, someone still has a cell phone on. And I was like, wow. Because a lot of people say that it's BS. They used to say turn off all electronic devices. Then people were like, oh, they don't need you to do it. I don't know. I was on a plane and they were like, someone's doing it. Maybe it was just because they saw the Wi-Fi and they were like, we don't want to risk it. Or maybe they actually knew that somebody's phone was on. But suffice it to say, the airline industry is crumbling. I mean, it is. Just think about this story. I mean, the 5G conspiracy nonsense aside, we've been talking about flight cancellations, labor shortages for months now. How many flight disruptions have we had in the news cycle? And then I throw it back to the Green New Deal. If we're going to get into the idea of the Great Reset and the goals of the Davos group, the World Economic Forum, certainly one of their issues is they don't like air travel. All of these planes flying around, they don't like it. It burns fuel, it makes carbon emissions and things like that. Well, we know that AOC talked about in the Green New Deal, at least in her FAQs, I believe, that until we can get people to stop flying and maybe build trains, we are going to have, carbon and these problems. These people want to get rid of all this stuff. So, surprise, surprise, one of the things collapsing is the airline industry. Take a look at this story from only a couple of weeks ago from Fortune. The Omicron airline collapse keeps getting worse. Here's how and when things should get better. Oh, they'll get better, you say? Yeah. Well, they're not. It's been a couple weeks, and now there's a whole new problem. Fortune writes thousands more flights were canceled across the country on New Year's Eve in the wake of a second straight day in which the U.S. shattered its record for daily COVID cases. Flight statuses are at the mercy of the Omicron variant, and the weather right now, said Charlie Leocha, president of Travelers United. No airline was spared from cancellations Friday, though some were hit harder than others. 17% of Allegiant Air flights were canceled. Another 9% were delayed, according to FlightAware. To put that in perspective, prior to the pandemic, 2.5% of U.S. flights were canceled in 2019, according to the Bureau of Transportation Stats. The increased cancellations Friday has come after millions of Americans are returning from their first holiday traveling since before the pandemic, just as the Omicron variant went from accounting for 12.6% of all purported U.S. cases of COVID to 73.2%. That, combined with an increase in airline staffers contracting the virus, contributed to a week in which airlines around the world were forced to cancel thousands of flights each day. In some parts of the country, severe weather also impacted flights. They keep saying that. Severe weather. When this was going down, there was no severe weather. Prior to this, there had been other big news about airline cancellations, and they said, oh, it's weather. What had happened was that there was a breaking news story. People were spreading rumors that pilots at Southwest and other airlines were rejecting the vaccine mandate and refusing to work, bowing out, shutting down these flights. The establishment spokespeople came out and said, this is not true. It's just inclement weather. And so people checked the national radar forecasting map and said, where? There's no bad weather. Now, the official explanation was, there was some bad weather in like the Pacific Northwest. And what that means is a flight in Florida, which needs to fly to Nebraska and then carry on to Seattle, can't move. So the flight there is delayed because its destination, it's not just about that one airport. It's about the after the airports. It's also about the planes coming from Seattle to Miami, who then, I don't know if they have a route that way, but you get the point. From one city to Miami, and that's the plane you would use for your flight to New York. It doesn't make it, so then all the flights get disrupted. I got to tell you, I used to fly twice a week. No joke. From 2014 to 2016, I was on 2 planes every week, on average. Maybe it's better to say about 1.5, because there were some weeks where I wouldn't travel that much. But I think I flew like 100 times in that year, or just about. So it was like twice a week I was flying. Never did I experience anything like this. I think I was in Dallas, Fort Worth, and there was a major storm. It was so bad that all of the lightning lights turn on. You ever see these at the airports? They have lights above the gates that turn on when lightning is detected because workers on the ground can't go outside if there is lightning. I used to work at O'Hare, and they told us this. If you see the lights turn on, you get off because we don't want you getting struck by lightning, and not worth it. That means everything gets grounded when there's lightning. Nobody wants to deal with it, but it happens. So when I'm flying, I'm on American, and they delay all of our flights. It didn't cause this level of disruption. It was a major storm. We were stuck. We got delayed for like an hour, and then we got on our plane and we left. This is something else. How many times do we need to have stories of major cancellations and delays, regardless of the circumstances, to at the very least just say the Green New Deal people are getting what they want? Airlines are collapsing for a variety of reasons. And I don't get I think it's fair to point out, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to think that something else is going on. Because what are the chances that we have a labor strike, not really a labor strike, bad weather. Then we get another labor shortage. Oh, that's COVID and bad weather. And now we have 5G towers and bad weather. Or maybe someone's just going to be like, yo, if in the span of 3 months, the airlines keep shutting down, something else may be at play here. I think it's fair to say labor shortages are probably the underlying condition here. No grand conspiracy. And I don't think they want that front and center. I don't think they want people I don't think they want to go out and tell you the economy is collapsing, will likely be totally collapsed, or just hyperinflation is on the way. They want to stem the bleed, essentially. If right now, so, Biden comes out and he goes, listen, Come on, man. The economy is being propped up by duct tape. That's a house of cards. This whole system blew up in 2008. And it's over. It's all over. People would lose their minds. They'd go out, they'd smash stuff, they'd steal stuff. So what it looks like to me when you look at the M1 money stock, since the 2008 crash, it's been insane. Obama did that stimulus, pumping money into the system. Then we get the pandemic trying to great reset the system because it's completely broken. And now it's just getting worse. The M1 money stock shows we free fall in 2020 because they basically said savings accounts are now checking accounts and people could just freely spend from them, which just disrupts the whole system. So anyway, look, back to the airlines. I think what's really happening is people aren't working. People aren't working and they're trying to come up with reasons to explain it away because if they came out and said there's no labor force anymore and we can't fix it, the system would collapse faster. That's why you see a lot of these stock guys. Like in 2008 when the economy was on the verge of exploding, like 2007, they were like, the economy is better than ever. Buy. Hoping that by convincing people it was good and to buy, they would, and it would stave off the collapse. In reality, all it did was allow the wealthy to extract money and resources from the poor, who were then left holding the bag. And I feel like that's what's happening now. Not in terms of just the airlines, but with all the major labor shortages, they shut down small businesses, they allow big box stores to remain open, and what happens is that the wealthy ultra elites are having their assets and resources protected. They're gaining wealth. Bezos, Bill Gates, all of these people have seen a massive increase in wealth, while the poor suffer, struggle to get around, can't travel anymore, can't find work, and you will own nothing, and you will be happy. This is a meme. And I think it's great. It was someone purporting to be from Poland. They said, in Poland, we had nothing and we were very unhappy. And it's a picture of, Poland was a Soviet satellite. And you can see the stores are empty except for like 5 items. And you'd walk into a store, this big store with shelves completely empty. And you'd walk up to the communist person working their communist job and say, what can I have? And they'd be like, we have flour. That's it. That's what you eat. I went to Ukraine. Been there several times. Amazing country, by the way. It's beautiful. And my friend was explaining to me wafer cake. It's what they serve with coffee. You'll order coffee and you'll get this little wafer with sweetened condensed milk in between layered. And what my friend said was during the Soviet Union, all they had was milk and flour. So what they would do is they would take the milk and they would cook it down into like caramel, basically, and then take the thin wafers and pour the caramel between it to make cake because that was all they could do. Instead of making a big, fluffy, enriched bread cake or brioche, it would just be condensed milk between very thin wafers. That's the reality of the Soviet Union. When I look at all this stuff, when I look at the labor shortage, when I look at the collapse, when I look at their excuses, and even if it is, 5G doing it, regardless, we can see the airlines are going up in flames. That means your travel is going away. But isn't it interesting? Let me just say, isn't it interesting that at a time when we hear Mark Zuckerberg talking about the metaverse, heavily investing in this virtual world, airlines are struggling? There's mass cancellations. They become unreliable. The Green New Deal. It said air travel's bad. Now we have the Great Reset, whatever you want to call it. We have industry collapsing, airlines collapsing, and Mark Zuckerberg to the rescue. Hey, man, put on your metaverse goggles and have your meetings in the digital world. Well, a lot of people might want to do that, I guess. I'm not saying it's a great conspiracy. I'm not saying they're colluding. I'm saying all of these market forces are happening around the same time. And in fact, you could just say it's market forces. As there is a collapse in airlines, Zuckerberg's like, now's our chance. If someone can't travel from Chicago to New York, metaverse is the answer. Everybody can wear their goggles and have their meetings in a little virtual room, and they'll have their little virtual avatars, and you could be a rabbit or a carrot or a giraffe or a pumpkin or whatever you want to be in the metaverse. I think this is where we're going. Transhumanism, I don't know. But I don't think people are going to want to deal with airlines. I think in response to the collapse we've seen over the past several months of these airlines, more and more people are being pressured into using virtual software. Zoom. I mean, look at what happened with the pandemic. It was a great reset. It was a great reset of everything these past 2 years. And now Fauci's coming out and saying, we're only in phase 1 of a 5-phase pandemic. By the end of this, assuming there is an end, you will live in the pod, you will eat the bugs, and you will work in the metaverse. You won't leave your pod. You won't travel. In the big cities, you'll live in your cubicle. Why? Because humans are farting themselves to death, destroying this planet. And that's the way they see it. And that's the world they're going to craft for you, and they don't care. The elites, the establishment, the people who run these corporations, they view you as a chicken in a chicken coop. They don't care about your individual thoughts. They don't care about you as a person. And I got to be honest, I can certainly understand a bit of that sentiment. I mean, come on, you all listening, you've encountered dumb people, right? You see them online all day, every day, and you wonder how it is these people survive. Useless eaters, that's the conspiracy theory term, I guess. There are many people, mostly in big cities, that contribute nothing to society. They don't farm, they don't cook, they're not self-sufficient. And what do? Do we just grow for the sake of growing? Do we tolerate for the sake of tolerance? Or do we tell people it's time to be personally responsible? If you don't want to produce to help society, you don't have to. That's your choice. But you're going to live in the pod and you're going to eat the bugs. And for those of us that are willing to be more self-sufficient, I move out to the middle of nowhere. I get chickens. We grow vegetables in the springtime, and we try to be as reliant on ourselves as possible and relying on the system less. It's impossible for the most part, but we try, right? Maybe that's where things need to go. People need to be responsible more for their own food, for their own shelter, for their own electricity. Otherwise, I'll tell you what, you live in the pod and you eat the bugs. No air travel for you. Get in the metaverse. It seems where we're going, right? I don't know if there's a path away from this other than moving out to the middle of nowhere. It seems like if you live in a city, that's your future. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.